Berachot Perek Hey, Mishnah Gimel. We are today learning, and we will be for a long while, God willing, learning for a Refuah Shlema for Rab Daniel Biller. Rab Daniel ben Miriam Chaya Ruth. He should have a speedy recovery, and he's in our thoughts and prayers. This Mishnah is a very fascinating Mishnah for many reasons. The Mishnah now turns to what happens if someone is a Shliach Tzibur, but then professes or expresses certain problematic beliefs. It's a fascinating issue because it's a problem that was back then, and it's always a problem, especially in today's orthodoxy. What's the boundaries of accepted belief, and what's considered orthodox and what's not? So apparently it's pretty clear that this isn't a new issue, it's an old issue, as I will explain. The Mishnah goes on to say, Ha'omer, one who says, Al kan sipor yagi'u rachamecha, that God's will, meaning he says in the davening, Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're davening to you, Al kan sipor yagi'u rachamecha, your compassion arrives, Al kan sipor, on the nest of the bird, the Al tov yizacher shemecha, and on goodness should your name be mentioned, should your name be remembered. Modim, or if he says modim twice instead of modim, mishatkinoto, we quiet him. I'll explain each one in its proper sense. Mishatkinoto means we quiet him, i.e. we don't let him become a Shliach Tzibur. We say, sorry, you are not eligible to serve as Chazan, and we get a new Chazan. So let's read, what's the problem with each one of these? So the first one is really fascinating. Ha'omer al kan sipor yagi'u rachamecha. So the Gemara says, and I'll quote for you, there's a Gemara here, the Gemara says, the problem is because the problem is because what you're doing is you're taking something that's Gzeirot HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitnei, because the Gemara says She'asam midotav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu rachamim ve'inam el gzeirot. You make the midot of a God into rachamim, into compassion, and they're gzeirot. Meaning, what's the reason that a person has to send away the mother and take only then can she take the eggs when they do kan sipor? The answer, says the Gemara, is because that's what God said. I'll show you again. Torah says, Ki karei kan sipor lefanecha b'derech b'chol eitz o el eretz hafochim bo beitzim v'ayim bo betzet al afrim b'ala beitzim. When you come across a nest, lo tikach ha'im al banim. Don't take the mother while the child with the eggs are there. Don't take the eggs. Shalech t'shalach et ha'im. Send away the mother, but avanim tikach lach leman yitav lach v'arachta yamin. So that it will be good for you, v'arachta yamin. And you should have long days. So it's very interesting. I'm looking at Wikipedia here. He says the Mishnah in Masechet Berachot sholelet nitinat tam. Right? It negates the idea of tam. It negates the idea of giving a reason. Why? Okay, and the Gemara explains because because it makes it into rachamim, i.e., the Mishnah seems to imply that we don't give ta'amei mitzvot. We don't keep mitzvot for certain reasons. Rather, we keep the mitzvot because God said to keep the mitzvot. And if you start giving reasons, you end up in a dangerous place. There's another Gemara Midrash that says because it's metil kina, it makes jealousy between the chayot, meaning why only birds? Why not on cows? Or, we're not compassionate on chickens and birds. Then on cows or deer or any other sheep or any other kosher animal. The Midrash says something fascinating. The Midrash says, okay, Rav Amar. Rav said, Lo nidnu mitzvot elo l'tzaref be'em et habriyot. The tzaref means to forge. Do it because I told you to, in essence. Does God really care if I slaughter an animal from the front or the back? So what that emerges from that is, it's a fascinating idea that according to the Mishnah, the simple explanation of the Mishnah is, if you say al kan sipor yagi'u rachamecha, i.e., I do mitzvot because they're beneficial to me, because they do what I want them to do. Whereas we don't know why we do mitzvot. We do them because God commanded us to do them. And interestingly enough, the Rishonim throughout much of history rejected the implication of this Mishnah, even about this mitzvah. The Chinuch gives a reason for the mitzvah. Even the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim gives another reason for the mitzvah. It is about compassion. It is about teaching us to be compassionate people, etc., etc. So one gets a clear sense from the Mishnah that this was a debate going on in the times of the Mishnah, and it was a very heated debate. Okay, next one. This is a little bit more simple. The Al Tov Yizacher Shemecha. God, you should remember for the good. We're going to see a Mishnah in the future that says, Kishem Shemebarchim Al Ha Tova. Just like we bless God for the good, Kach mevarchim ala ra'ah. You bless God for the bad, for what we consider bad. That we say, Baruch Dayan HaEmet. This is very, very hard to accomplish. But nonetheless, when you're davening to God, when you're praying to God, you don't say, God, we love you for the good things that happen. We believe that everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does is tov. Everything he does is good. So you can't just say thanks for the good. You have to say, Baruch Hashem, even when it doesn't seem so good. And finally, modim. This one I find most fascinating. If a guy is the Shliach Tzibor, and he's davening, he says, modim. Mishatkin, we get rid of him. We hush him. Why? The Kahati explains, the Gemara says, why? Because nir'ah kimodeh lishtei rishuyot. Kolomar lishtei elahot. It's as if, it seems like he is giving modim to two gods. I.e., the two gods in their time prevalent. There was the God of good, the God of evil, the God of yin, the God of yang, whatever gods you're saying. Which is, to me, unbelievably fascinating. Because what that means is that you would have a guy, hey, Yanko, you want to down for the Amud? Sure. You didn't know if he was praying to God, to the one true God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or if in his mind, at that time, there were people that believed also in all kinds of things, in Avodah Zarah, in idol worship. And they were your Shliach Tzibur. There's the guy sitting next to you. You don't really know what his level of belief is. Everybody practiced sort of similar things. And so there's this idea that even in the middle of davening, the Shliach Tzibur, they would have to, you can imagine, like nowadays, the guy's landing, I can't go on, whatever. But then the Shliach Tzibur was the Shliach, you didn't know who he was, if he was a problem. It seems clear from the fact that the Mishnah has the list is that they had to deal with this problem on an ongoing basis. The Mishnah continues, and also this Mishnah also gives us a sense of what the Shliach Tzibur's job was. If someone is over lifnei hateva, passes before the ark, i.e., he's davening for the Amud, that's what we would say, he's a Shliach Tzibur. Ya'avor acher tachtav, someone else should go in his place. Lo yehi sarvan ve'otasha. We're familiar with halacha that if they ask you to daven, no, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy to be a Shliach Tzibur. So first of all, now we see, interestingly, like, if you think about it today, they had a sitter, they had a nusach, so daven, what's the big deal? It seems clear to me, when I read these Mishnayot, it's clear that the Shliach Tzibur wasn't just saying the text. It wasn't just saying the obvious text. How could you then make a mistake? He forgot, they didn't have a siddur, maybe, but it seems a little unusual. It seems clear that the Shliach Tzibur was using the text as a springboard for a much broader sense of tefillah. This would make a lot of sense in the context of what is, to now, we daven Shmona Esrei, and then we say Chazar Nashas. It's the same thing. One gets a very strong sense in times of the Mishnah, and I don't know when it stopped, but the Shliach Tzibur had a certain verbal ability. He had the words, and he would embellish, and he would continue, he would go on, he would describe, and please give a refuah to Rabbi Biller, and etc., and Berachot Hashanim, and we need the rain, and the bugs are coming out, and now's the time of the season where we're doing the weeding, and we have to have a good harvest. And that's why a person who's over lifnei hateva, he could make a mistake. He could become confused. Whereas nowadays, you just read the Siddur, it's a big deal. It seems clear to me that the Shliach Tzibur's job was much, much more significant than it is today. So if he gets messed up, if he makes a mistake, Ya'avor acher tachtav, then we can find someone else, i.e., someone who else can continue, and that person should take the job. Shouldn't say, no, I'm not worthy, etc., etc. Minayin u'matchil, where does it begin? Mitchilat ha'bracha sheta'azeh, from the beginning of the place where the other person made a mistake. I.e., if the person made a mistake in the middle of Berech Aleinu, in the middle of Berachot Hashanim, so he goes back and says, begins Berachot Hashanim. The halacha is, though, if the Shliach Tzibur makes a mistake in the first three brachot, the new Shliach Tzibur starts in the beginning of Shemona Esrei. In the last three brachot, he starts with Ritzei. Although Lema'aseh, I've never actually seen it happen. I don't know anybody who's ever seen it happen, that the Shliach Tzibur stops and cannot continue. Okay, as always, have a great day. If you have any questions or comments, rspolter@gmail.com.